All In Sports Network. We love sports.
Will the Aggies finally do it? Will Texas A&M win a road game for the first time since October 2021? We talked about it earlier in the week. We're going to take a full dive into this game now. Florida, Texas A&M. Our day before preview, we'll have the return of the pecking order, the 5 things I'm looking for, because I am your host, Ben Peck. We started that last week. Kind of want to keep that moving forward. It won't always be necessarily the 5 things I'm looking for, the 5 top priorities or nothing like that necessarily, but kind of works out for these first 2 weeks. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, comment, let us know what you think of the topics that we discuss, things you want to see on the show. Have a conversation in the comments with all of us, and we'll try to engage as best we can. All right, let's get to this. I think number one, though, the most interesting thing that has not been talked about by us yet with this game, the SEC mandating injury reporting for conference games. That gives us some insight into, obviously, injuries, but an open transparency and maybe some things that we wouldn't have found out about until the day of. I walking around pregame and you're like, oh, this guy's just not dressed out. Hadn't heard anything about him. We avoid that this week. Couple notable situations on that injury report for Florida and Texas A&M. At the time of me taping this, Connor Weigman popping up, I believe, on Thursday for the first time as questionable at quarterback. Notably on the other side, Graham Mertz, not listed, did not play against Samford for Florida. I almost always say Stanford, even when I'm not trying to. But he's not on there. So presumably he's available. Does he play? Does he start? That's maybe a different conversation. But let's talk about Connor Weigman. I have to give myself a little pat on the back. I noticed late first half against McNeese, the first team offense is out there. And like the guys I looked for to confirm it was not just the receivers, but I looked like Trey Zoom was out there for the offensive line. I'm like, okay, if Trey Zoom's out there, then they're still trying. And they still got the first unit out there. And Marcel Reed comes into the game. And I remember looking at someone saying, that's kind of interesting. Like Connor's playing fine. Like, we're not throwing the ball deep down the field necessarily just yet, but they're not like, what's going on here? He's clearly probably still their best option. I doubt this is like a quarterback competition that's ongoing. And the rest of the teams out there, it's not like they've put in all the backups. And now here we go. Per the reporting out there, Billy Lucci and others, Connor Weigman is legitimately questionable for this game against Florida. And so now it makes a little more sense. If he was not 100% in that McNeese State game, obviously you get some reps from Marcel Reed. We saw him fill in the bowl game kind of impromptu. I can't remember if it was the very first play where Jalen Henderson went out in that bowl game? Either way, first series. And I thought played fairly admirably considering he did not have much of a supporting cast in that game because of the numerous, people sitting out, transfers, all that. So Marcel Reed, I think from what we've seen to this point has been, you really understand why he is the number 2 guy in your depth chart. And I say that for both the good and the bad. Not even the bad, but you see why they believe in him enough to say, hey, if something happens to Connor, we're going to get this guy a shot. You also saw enough work in progress against McNeese State to understand that, okay, I understand that there's still room to grow, room to improve. I mean, he is only a sophomore. It is a new system. It was his first live game action in the system. This is not a shot at Marcel Reed, but I think you want, especially for the people questioning Connor Weigman after week 1, like, really? Is he the guy? I think you saw how they compared side by side and said, okay, I think that makes sense as to why he's still probably your best option if he's available. Well, he is, in my opinion. But we asked about it Saturday. I was preparing to potentially ask the question. It got asked before me. I believe Carter Carls, gave him 247, was asking about Connor Weigman. A lot of people were asking about Connor Weigman. Coach Elko kind of seemed like he was getting sick of it, so I didn't poke the bear once again. But he asked, how did we think Marcel Reed looked against McNeese State? That's what Mike Elko had to say to that.
I think Marcel's still working on just consistently, functioning the way you want him to when he's out there. And so I thought you saw some good signs from him. I thought he made some good throws. I think there were some throws he wished he had back. But again, until you get out there and get the game experience, don't forget that's the first snaps he's taken live in this offense now too. And so I thought it was great for him to get out there. And, again, we'll go back to work and get better.
So there you go. Marcel Reed, final stats on the day, pulling him up right now. 5 for 11, 71 yards rushing. He was 7 for 43, did not take a sack. So, I mean, Connor was 4 for 40 or 4 for 39 technically, and had 1 for a loss. So, I mean, you look at that, you say, okay, there's something different that he brings to go out there unless you're up 50. You're not going to go out there and run your air raid offense I'm not saying A&M has one, but, you're not going to sling it when you're just trying to, in the game, get through it. So even these backups that come in, especially in the passing game, I feel like it's hard to give them a fair evaluation because you're not showing all your cards and you're not doing everything you possibly can to, extenuate their strengths in those situations. But 5 for 11, 71 yards, a long of 31 on that slant to Cyrus Allen that you saw. So, I mean, if you take out that pass, and I know they all count, so I know you can't do that. But if you do 4 for 10 for 40 yards, that's something that obviously would have to get better. But again, I think they would, in that situation, give him a lot better options, more plays, better plays to be able to do that. But yeah, let's talk about if Connor Weigman's unavailable. What does this mean? How does this change the dynamic of the game? I think you lean even more on your run game, even more than you do. And I think you already do significantly. I think it certainly means you lean on your quarterback run game, knowing too that you do have Jalen Henderson available. I would imagine the game plan for those two guys can be a lot more similar to, Marcel Reed and Jalen Henderson compared to Connor Weigman and Marcel Reed. I think that divergence is more stark, I would imagine, if you were to, get some truth serum to Colin Klein to answer that question. And I guess just really avoiding mistakes. We're going to get to that in the pecking order. Things I'm looking for Saturday, top 5 things. But let's hope Connor's okay. Fortunately, it doesn't sound like whatever it is not going to be, like I say, lingering. Assuming no further escalations, it's not going to be a lingering situation. It's nothing like that. So that's the good news. But we'll see how it goes. I think I would probably lean towards seeing him start if he's available. Well, obviously he'll start if he's available. But if it's a question, I would lean toward seeing him out there, and if he struggles, you maybe take him out. But we'll have to see. Another notable injury on that injury report, Tyreek Chappelle out. That is apparently, per Billy Lucci, like I said, a long-term situation. We'll get clarification on that on Monday, maybe Saturday as well. That's tough, but I don't think in this specific game it's a huge loss necessarily, not because Tyreek Chappelle's not a valuable player. He is, but I don't know how scared I am of the Florida passing attack, especially if it's Graham Mertz, if I'm being honest. So I think, something to monitor. I also just feel way better about the depth in the secondary than I would last year. Like last year, if you lose Bryce Anderson or, you name it, like, oh boy, here we go. Now this year, they've been a pretty solid unit, and we're going to get to that coming up here in the pecking order. All right. And also just touching on Graham Mertz. He is available, bringing up his stats from that first game. 11 for 20, 91 yards, 1 interception. That is precisely why I'm not too concerned about the passing attack, like I mentioned, for Florida. I understand they kicked the doors in on Samford, but I don't know. It was very Notre Dame, A&M-esque. Like for both teams, honestly, A&M and Notre Dame, was not the most dynamic passing attack I've seen in the world. So, and I'll be honest, I have not been big believer in Graham Mertz for a minute. I understand he's not the worst quarterback in the world. I'm not saying that, but I don't know that he elevates you. I think he is more reflective. He allows you to reflect what you have around him, and he plays to that level. I don't think he changes it one way or the other, but I just don't know that the guys around him are game changer level guys. And you throw in another quarterback who's like that, and you just get kind of a middle of the road pedestrian offense, in my opinion. So that's maybe where I see with that. Whereas with Connor Weigman, I think there is that potential in there to where we haven't really seen it yet. And, maybe he's been battling, first of all, still what is a good secondary for Notre Dame. And then to whatever extent he was dealing with injuries against McNeese State that limited, not his production, because his production was efficient, but limited the upside maybe. And also just the competitive dynamic of that game where you're not going to show everything against McNeese State. So they kind of kept it in-house a little bit, it felt like. So I don't know, but I think Connor Weigman's a guy who, if he's clicking, they're clicking, you could start talking about. I mean, I saw some predictions, I'm sure all you did, about Noah Thomas potentially. If Connor Weigman has the type of year where he could potentially position himself to be a first-round level NFL draft pick, or at least on the fringe of that, then Noah Thomas might be a first-round level type wide receiver if it moves. I think Connor Weigman can elevate his guys. I just don't know that Graham Mertz can. So we'll see how it plays out. And again, this is All In Aggies with Ben Peck. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Like, tell a friend, share. We're just trying to grow the show as fast as we can, and we've done really well within the network for All In Sports. So we appreciate you. Keep it going. Let's keep it moving. We are not going to be at the Swamp on Saturday, but we will have reaction for you of whatever happens with that game. So be sure to join us for that. All right. And now it is time for the much awaited pecking order for week 3, Texas A&M at Florida. The 5 things I, Ben Peck, will be looking for the most as the Aggies try to finally win a game on the road for the first time since October 2021. We start fittingly with that quarterback situation. We just touched on it. Connor Weigman, questionable for this game. Marcel Reed potentially might have to start this game. And if he does, you certainly need to protect him, not only for, you've got limited options. Something interesting that I'll say too, that I'm not sure if Marcel Reed starts and something does happen. I probably think you see Jalen Henderson come in the game before Connor Weigman, because like I said, I think unless he absolutely cannot go, I think Connor Weigman will play in this game. But if Connor Weigman is at least limited, you have to protect him. You need to protect him anyway, but you need to be able to give him time to do what he does, give those receivers time to get open, particularly down the field. We'll touch on that. And I think they can do it. I've been relatively encouraged by what we've seen offensive line-wise. I think they will mesh more over the course of the year than other teams on average because of the new scheme, the new parts, the new offensive line coach. Every team gets better over the course of the year, generally speaking, so I understand that. But I think the rate at which A&M does will continue to improve. So if you looked at the McNeese State game, I don't take too much away from that, good or bad. But if you look at how they performed against Notre Dame, I'll just say it could have been far worse. It could have been, if they were not prepared and they were at a suboptimal level, it could have been bad. And it wasn't. It was not perfect, but it was, I thought, good, still good enough for you to win that game if other things break your way. So number 5, protect the quarterback. Number 4, on the pecking order, play from the front. Play ahead. You do not, again, and it's a common theme that we've seen. I don't know about this team's ability to overcome a multiple score deficit in a second half, particularly on the road in a hostile environment, and a very hostile environment at that in Florida. When that crowd gets going and knowing that they're playing with their, it's too early to say their season on the line, but doesn't it feel like they're playing with their long-term prospects and future on the line for this era of Florida football? Like, if this doesn't work and they lose this game, I'm not saying this is a must win for Billy Napier and he's gone if they lose, but if this season doesn't pan out for Billy Napier, and you do have to make a change, that's going to potentially set you back big time. So, and this is probably one of the games they have circled as a bellwether game of what are we doing here? So my point is, getting back to the original point, you can't fall behind. You want to play ahead. You want to be able to lean on the run in terms of your bread and butter. I think that will be this team's bread and butter is their run game with the stable of backs, as they talk about, Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, E.J. Smith. And you need that to be not every single play, but you need to be able to have that part of the game carry you through. I don't know, especially if Connor Weigman is limited, I don't know that you can just throw him out there and say, take us to the promised land, Connor, sling it and run around, do what you got to do, and we're going to come out on top because you're going to throw for 350 and we're going to go crazy. I don't know that I see the offense in this point. So have to play from the front, get a lead. Number 3. Okay, this one kind of depends. Either attack Mertz or contain Lagway. Get to him, keep him in the pocket. Graham Mertz, like I said, I think he's vulnerable. I think he's turnover prone. I think he's almost, dare I say, like Tyler Van Dyke-esque minus the upside. That's maybe kind of how I feel about him. I feel like you can rattle Graham Mertz, but if you don't, he can make you pay. So again, this sounds like a very negative video on Graham Mertz. And again, I'm not super, super high on the guy, but I do think he's capable enough that if you're not ready and you're not prepared, he's serviceable. I just think he's a serviceable game manager quarterback, which is not an insult, but you got to fluster him. And if you fluster him, he can make mistakes and make life a lot easier for you. You got to do that. We've talked about the sacks. They haven't gotten them. Coach, I think, talked about how he wasn't worried about the sacks because they're getting quarterback pressures. They forced 2 interceptions based almost strictly off of pressures last week. So that's the pressure rate's probably more important than the actual sacks, but you do have to make him uncomfortable. And then Lagway, I mean, move him off his feet, but keep contain on him. Don't let him get out and run around like crazy. But also, don't let him set his feet and just chunk it because he can. And he's got a hell of an arm. He's super athletic. He can make you pay with big plays. And we'll touch on that in just a bit. But DJ Lagway, you can't let him turn into Cam Newton, Jr. Okay. You gotta keep him contained and make him beat you with his arm with pinpoint precision passes. I think that is probably your best bet. And then, like I said, especially if your offense is taking care of the ball, playing complementary football, limiting his opportunities to do damage in the first place. So attack Mertz, contain Lagway. Number 3. Number 2, take the crowd out of it. Now that means a couple things. As we said, playing with the lead, that can help. But the biggest thing for me when I say that, penalties, turnovers, big plays, have to limit them. Cannot allow plays to happen that injects life and belief and a resurgence in that crowd and then in turn in that team. They've done a fairly good job of that so far. I know the couple interceptions against Notre Dame, again, McNeese State, it is what it is. But, I don't believe Texas A&M is allowed to pass longer than 20 yards this season. And Florida, especially with DJ Lagway, does a lot of that. So that's going to be one where something's got to give. If they move the ball down the field in chunks and they score off of drives like that, okay, tip your hat. I personally, I can live with that. You can't have big busts, big chunk plays. Why we haven't seen busts, like I said, in terms of the secondary, but even catch and run or a big run gap open up for these running backs. That is one thing that has been a little bit of a sore spot, as Coach Elko said on Monday. It's just, quite frankly, it just hasn't been good enough. There's no sugarcoating it. You're allowing, I think it was something like 180 yards against McNeese State. Yeah, 180 right on the dot on 38 attempts. So, and that's with no sacks too. So that's got to be better. You can't let them dictate things from that point of view. Take care of the ball. Avoid really not just penalties. Well, avoid any third down penalties that extend drives. Avoid any penalties that are effectively drive killers. Is probably what I got to say there. You are going to be tested enough to where you're not good enough to be able to overcome those things yet. I don't think. You've got to make your life as simple as possible. As my sister once said about how we plan our family vacations, like, why are we doing this? It seems a little, we're flying into here, then we're connecting here, but we're flying into somewhere else when we get back, and then we're switching rental cars midway through. Because if we did it the normal way, as she said, that wouldn't be complicated enough. That would be too easy. Don't make it any more complicated than you need to be. And number one, speaking of taking the crowd out of it and limiting big plays for them, want to see some chunk plays offensively. We still have not seen, I believe, a pass that has been more than 20 yards down the field in terms of just the aerial, like vertically. We've seen catch and runs that have gone, I think, 20 yards for Moose, 31 yards for Cyrus Allen. I think the touchdown to Noah Thomas was about, I think it was like a 15-yard touchdown pass, and he was probably about 5 yards deep in the end zone. So I'll give him 20 yards on that. It doesn't have to be down the field passing. I'm not saying four verts, but I want to see at the very least, if you're not doing that, those plays open up more often where you can get chunks. Because again, like we were talking about with the penalties and turnovers, I don't think you're good enough right now to rely on consistently moving the ball down the field on long drives time after time after time. We've seen it in them. We saw the Notre Dame drive. That's fine. I like, by the way, this goes both ways. If you're just relying on big plays and then when they're gone, you have nothing, I think that's a problem. I think you have to have both. I think it has to be a blend. We've seen them being able to grind out drives and do that. And for any given, 1st and 10 series, that's fine. But just if we could sprinkle in just a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm looking at the long runs against, Terry Bussey, like the Terry Bussey play, 65-yard touchdown. Oh my goodness. By the way, that could have technically, it was a rush, but very easily could have been a pass to kind of pad those passing stats if you wanted to do that. But huge. If you get one of those plays, you don't have to worry about it. The rest of the drive, you don't have to worry about, on second down, 2nd and 4, there's a false start, or there's a hold, or there's a this, or there's a that. It just eliminates room for error. Just make it simple. Get into the end zone, or move the ball 20 plus yards, 15 plus yards down the field. Explosive plays. Doesn't have to happen all the time or every other play or every other play, but just we need to see some. We can't have these games like Notre Dame because that's what you run into. The Notre Dame game, they were grinding the entire way, even on the touchdown drive. And then you get to the point, like I said, you're backed up down the touchdown. You got to move kind of quick. You can't do it. And God forbid, one thing goes wrong on 1st down or 2nd down, and you're done. So let's give A&M a little bit of cushion. Let's do this. And also, I guess it should just be, it goes without saying, but handle your business on the road in general. Like, I don't know what kind of bugaboo voodoo has been placed on this team to where Mike Elko was the defensive coordinator the last time they won a game on the road. Devon A-Chain was still pronounced. We were still calling him Devon A-Chain instead of Devon A-Chain. That's how long it was ago. Okay. We need to see the streak come to an end. 2-1 record at that point. Then you play Bowling Green. After that, look how much of as our friend Josh Pate says, a hinge game this is for the season for Texas A&M. You win that game 2-1, assuming you beat Bowling Green 3-1. I'd feel pretty good about Arkansas, potentially 4-1. You host Mizzou. Let's see what happens. Whereas you lose to Florida 2-2. maybe, or excuse me, 1-2. And then if you beat Bowling Green 2-2, how do we feel about the Arkansas game? They gave Oklahoma State a tough game. Maybe you're 3-2, 2-3. Then you play Mizzou. I mean, this game just is massive for both teams. We touched on the urgency for Florida, urgency for A&M. I am going to say official prediction, I like A&M's ability to get this done, but I do not think it'll be more than a touchdown. Maybe 8 points, one possession still, but I don't see this being a double-digit win for A&M unless Florida's just awful, which is possible, but I don't know if A&M is good enough to right now say, even against a team that has glaring issues and weaknesses, you can count on them to make them pay the way we saw Miami do in week 1 against the Gators. So we'll see. Time will tell. Again, part of that prediction is influenced by the health status of Connor Weigman. I think they probably win with him or without him, but I'm just saying in terms of the potential ceiling upside in terms of the performance for A&M, that gives me pause and makes me a little concerns too strong, but that gives me caution. So cautiously optimistic, I'd say. I don't know. I mean, official score prediction, maybe like 24, 17, 16, something like that. But I don't think it'll be any more than that. I don't think it'll be anything crazy. I think it'll be a gut punch. I think if they win it, credit Mike Elko. That's a high character win for that coaching staff and that football team. So we'll see how the Aggies do. Kind of a quiet weekend on campus for the rest of the sports. As we mentioned, we do cover every sport here on All In Aggies. Soccer picked up a shutout win at Central Connecticut. Cross country finished second. By the way, cross country finished second at the A&M Invitational. They had like 5,500 fans out there for cross country, man. And there was a lot of schools, but good for them and good for that program. Volleyball's got a couple games this weekend, and then hosting Temple Friday. I'm not going to go down the list. We'll talk New Hampshire on Saturday. But anyways, this is kind of the main attraction of the weekend for A&M viewing purposes. Texas A&M Florida SEC opener. Let's see how the Aggies do. That is going to do it for All In Aggies here on Friday, September 13th. Friday the 13th. Oh, my goodness. Didn't even realize that. Thank you so much. Thank goodness it's not Saturday the 13th. Need a little luck for the Aggies against the Gators, but we'll see if they can do it. See if they can prove me wrong. Let's see if they beat Florida definitively and decisively, and maybe open our eyes a little bit about the still potential of this team and the potential accomplishments moving down the road. But I hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy the game. We will touch base afterwards to give you our initial thoughts. Full show coming up on Sunday. Appreciate you, and thank you so much for watching another episode of All In Aggies. Subscribe, comment, like if you liked it. Tell a friend. Help us make this the best show possible. Thank you.
All In Sports Network. We love sports.